Welcome to Prana Stories, Dr. Manoj Gundanna, sir. I know you as a researcher. You have a doctorate based on the PhD in the work that you have done in terms of temple architecture, history, and archaeology. And you have done obviously after finishing your Master of Arts in the similar subjects. So I'm so glad that you are in Prana Stories as a guest, and then you will enlighten most of my audience. I am so used to talking to you in Shuddha Kannada. This is like a little different to talk to you in English because my audience probably fortunately or unfortunately in English because many people understand the subject more better in English. So that's why I'm speaking to you in English. So welcome to Prana Stories once again.
Namaste. It's very, it's a pleasurable thing to be a participant here. I have followed some of your videos, especially Srimati Arti's and Arjun Bharadwaj's lectures I have heard. And it's a very good thing. Nowadays, youngsters are really taking an interest, at least in trying to understanding what our culture really is.
Yeah.
And in language, there is nothing as Shuddha and Ashuddha. You cannot find any language in its Shuddha form.
Right.
Only thing is, sometimes I usually do not like to mix languages.
Correct, yeah.
When we have a lot of what is called as Akshara Bandhara, in our languages, we do have a lot of words, terms and terminologies. So intermixing sometimes.
Yeah.
Personally for me,
Yeah.
I don't say it is right.
Correct.
So I don't prefer doing it.
Correct, yeah.
Otherwise, I have nothing against any language. And as you mentioned, English is a universal language, and if it is the medium of communication, naturally, our ideas and ideologies will reach a farther masses.
Yeah.
So this is very practical.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that understanding. Yeah, when I meant Shuddha is because of the mixing of the words that we are so used to today.
True.
Kanglish, Tanglish, Manglish, all these things.
That happens.
Yeah. But speaking to Dr. Manoj sir, I have realized that I want to speak Kannada the way he speaks.
Good.
I really want to do that. So I will strive for that.
No, if I just can tell it here.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be very fanatic about any language. See, there are some concepts which are totally alien to our language. For example, computer or camera or something like that. We need not forcefully use other, create words for that. The concept is not ours.
Yeah.
But when it comes to common words in our daily usage or whatever, as I said, we have a lot of words and usages in Kannada. So I prefer using those terms instead of switching off to some other language.
Correct, yeah.
That's the...
Yeah, I'll definitely strive for that, sir. So, I was always... when I think of me as an youngster, I was wanting to do some sort of an education, and I had some goal that generally, I'm sure you must have done your degree and the PhD around 80s, 90s?
Late 80s and early 90s.
Even in that age, today, the youth of that age, we're always striving for something like, okay, let me get a degree, let me probably get an engineering degree and get a job. And that was the goal.
Engineering was a mandatory thing.
Okay, yeah, true.
If you have to consider yourself as a complete human,
correct.
So engineering or medicine.
Medicine was
the preferred professions or academics in those days.
Yeah. So in that perspective, how did you choose MA in history and archaeology? And after that, you went on to do a PhD in archaeology and specifically the temples of Salem. That's temples of almost South India. Right? What sparked your interest and what was it?
From my very young days, whenever I visited temples, it was the approach was less religious. And whenever I visited a temple, my curiosity towards the construction methodology, the style, the massive effort they have put in the construction,
Hmm.
this always kindled my thoughts.
Okay.
It was not just entering the temple, going to the sanctum sanctorum, the Garbhagriha, having the darshan, having the prasad and returning. So even when I used to converse with my students in the later years, I used to tell them, see, the general impression of temple visitors, just having the darshan, as they tell it in Kannada, hannu kai madiskondu prasada tinnodu. So it is just go, get the puja done and have the prasada. That was never such a visit in my young days. Even when I was 11, 12, 13,
Okay.
even in that age, these things really kindled a lot of curiosity in me. I was always, questioning, of course, for myself. Now, what do these really mean? Do they carry any meaning? And we see a lot of difference in ancient temples and the modern structures. So why this difference? All these things. And at the same time, my aunt, my mother's sister, in their house, they used to regularly get India Today.
Okay.
In those days, I don't know the present situation, but in those days, I mean late 80s and early 90s, this India Today used to have a column called as archaeology.
Okay.
In that, there used to be a lot of articles related to general archaeology and temples. And this extended my knowledge that at that age, usually, even now, even many of the elders don't know, that even in the farther eastern countries, like Cambodia, Java, Bali, there are a lot of Hindu structures. So when I was 13, 14, when I was in my high school, this was the time when I started reading about those Angkor Wat temple, the biggest Hindu temple.
Southeast Asia, basically.
So Southeast Asia and all these things. So these things made me, prompted me to take up archaeology and specialize in temple architecture. So by the time I reached my 9th standard, I decided I would graduate in archaeology.
Okay.
And in my school days, as you were telling, when the teachers or some of the people, they ask you, right, what are your future plans?
Exactly.
And if your answer is something other than engineering and medicine, then you are considered abnormal.
Exactly.
So I was an abnormal kid, and I told I would want to do archaeology. And there were some teachers of my high school. I studied in National High School, Bangalore. So they appreciated. They found it's really very different, and he's not just saying it out of some fantasy. He really knows the purpose. So they also encouraged me to read some good books related to archaeology and other things. And by God's grace, I had interest. My parents nurtured it. It was not like there were no clashes, because my mother herself, she was a Tamil professor.
Okay.
She had done her master's in 62, 63.
Okay.
So in those days, a lady going to other place to study, staying in a hostel, post-graduating was something lesser known.
Right.
So at that time she had done
her master's in what?
Tamil literature.
Tamil literature.
She hails from Salem.
Okay.
She did in Tamil literature, and she worked as a Tamil professor almost for a decade in Salem. So she was quite familiar with humanities and all those things.
Okay.
She was in the teaching profession. So only thing they told was, see, you do whatever you want, but you should put your best effort and bring out best results.
Nice.
That is what they told. It is not whether you are becoming an engineer or something else.
Yeah.
Whatever you are doing it out of passion, but you should bring out good results. You may not just find reasons to, come out of it or leave it midway.
Right.
So, and again, as I said, it is God's grace. By God's grace, I post-graduated in Ancient History and Archaeology from Mysore University. After that, I wanted to take up temple architecture, because as I said, from my younger days, that was the time. And as I said, my mother is from Salem. So we used to travel a lot to Salem, and Salem was like a second home, and I was very familiar traveling in Tamil Nadu. It's there are many temples there. And I was traveling in Karnataka also equally. So again, by God's grace, we don't have any bias towards language or region.
Right.
So both ways I used to travel. And my, again, curiosity was, we visit the imperial pockets like Halebeedu, Belur or Badami, where you find royal consecrations of temples.
Yes.
At the same time, you go to Madurai, Tanjavur, these are all capital seats of Cholas, Pandyas and all.
Yeah.
But in intermediate buffer zones, there are a lot of places like the modern day Chittoor, Salem, Bangalore, Kolar. These regions, they have always been ruled by both the imperial dynasties.
Okay.
So if you see, the Gangas extended their rule up to almost Salem in the 10th century. Nolambas ruled those regions. Then Cholas come up to the southern Karnataka region. So they had their rule over southern Karnataka for almost 1.5 centuries, 150 years or so. Then again, Hoysalas, they go up to Tiruchinappalli.
Okay.
So this shift of imperial power has been there. So today, I don't know if it's sensible or not, the country is divided based on languages,
yeah.
which I really don't feel it is that helpful or that has helped something. But however, it has happened.
Yeah.
So whatever we are recognizing, that was not so hard and fast in those days. So we find Kannada inscriptions even up to Dharmapuri and those regions.
Yeah.
There are Tamil inscriptions in southern parts of Karnataka. We find Kannada inscriptions in Maharashtra, Gujarat, all those places. So how did the temple activity work in some buffer zones? That was my approach towards this study.
Correct.
I wanted to know that. Because stylistically we say, oh, Tanjavur, the Chola style is this, they use this stone, this, that, okay, fine. Hoysalas, we define it. But what did the Hoysalas, because both of them have patronized temples in the entire extent of their empire. Even in the buffer zone, we find a lot of Hoysala temples and Chola temples, being patronized equally at the same time. So this shift I wanted to observe. And gradually in the course of my work, initially, my guide, Professor Dr. M.S. Krishnamurthy from Mysore, he wanted me to work on some sculptures because it is more interesting. Because you have a lot of nuances. Sanskrit literature can be deeply dealt with and all those things.
Okay.
He was telling you have some knowledge of Sanskrit, you can understand. So why don't you do it on iconography? I was a little bent towards architecture, and he was feeling architecture may result in a little drier compared to the sculptural part. Even now, if you go to visit any temples, you may observe that the tourists or common folk, they will be more introduced into the sculptures found in the temple than the architectural parts or adjuncts or whatever. So, but somehow the work was going on, and suddenly, when I started using some Sanskrit terms for the adjuncts of the temple, so he asked me, why don't you try to find the etymology? What are the texts which talk about the temples? So like this, there was a turn in my research. Then I started studying our indigenous texts on temple architecture, which had to be done. Then during the course of my PhD, I almost studied 6 texts, vastugranthas and agamas. And there were some minor references of other possible texts, because you know that a PhD will have to be completed in a limited time and so on. So like that, the work ended to be a very good a work of its kind, where a lot of Indian concepts regarding temples. See, what happens, archaeologists have been studying temple architecture, and they are doing it based on the principles which were formed by the Western scholars during the British era, which is not wrong. They were exposed to it, and they were academically trained that way. At the same time, we have traditional agamikas and stapatis, Vishwakarma people, who still know the science of temple building in the indigenous style. But only thing was, there was a lack of integrating both the concepts. So that was what done in my thesis. So we started recognizing our temples, identifying the structures based on our Vastu Shastra Granthas.
Okay.
So this, as I said, gave a new form and a new approach to the study of temple architecture.
Sure. So we will come to the text part of this, scriptures part of it.
Sure.
But since you spoke about the history part and the dynasties and the kingdoms and all that, and where temples got built and stuff like that, there are many podcasts on YouTube which also say because there is no evidence of temple remains, they say temples were built only, it started getting built during the Gupta period. That's the popular notion which is there. So now let me ask what is your take on that?
As I said, see, what happens is the subject of temple architecture began to be academically studied only during the British period. Before that, the concept of temple in the Bharatiya concept was totally different. But they saw temple more as a structure. It's a structure, and they were fascinated by the decorations or the technology, the science behind the engineering behind the temple building, and that's what made them study the temples. Because what happens, there has been a tendency among the Westerners to claim that they have been the the connoisseurs of science, of any branch of knowledge. It's because of their research or this thing they could bring out all this marvels which exist in
even
the world.
Today it is there.
Yeah, even today it is there, and unfortunately many of the Bharatiyas acknowledge it. While talking about temples, I get surprised. People, while talking about some temples, they say, oh, a German scholar appreciated it, some other scholar. Why should they appreciate? I don't mean to say they should not appreciate. Our appreciation also should be valued, right? If some Oriental, some Japanese scholar or some other scholar appreciates, it doesn't really please them much, as it does with this. This is some kind of
a colonial mindset.
Colonial mindset. So they were really marveled by what happened. In spite of that, there have been some sincere scholars who have worked on Indian temple architecture, like Percy Brown, Henry Cousins. They have done a lot of selfless work when it comes to temple architecture. We should acknowledge that also. At least as Bharatiyas, we shouldn't be narrow-minded.
Correct, yeah.
So, but what happened was, while they studied these temples, as we all know that they depend on natural facts, what they see through their naked eyes, that those were the things they usually take into consideration.
Like factual matters.
Factual matters.
Yes.
And that is why they are so fascinated with pure science. They cannot think beyond the physical concepts. Everything has to be, as we call it, to put it in the sthula rupa. That is what they are usually, they consider it. So when they started studying the temple architecture, with this academic perspective, they saw that the remains of Buddhist architecture seem to be earlier than the remains of the Hindu or Vedic, however you put it,
devalaya.
This thing. First of all, what is really surprising and disturbing is you are alienating Buddhism as if it is something from the outside. See, Buddhism was also something which was born in this very land. Right? So it did not emerge from something outside, and it is not something it just generated by itself. There are some philosophies, some concepts from the Vedic literature which inspired even Buddha for that matter.
It is still part of Sanatana.
It is part of our Sanatana Dharma and Bharata. It is not something from outside. But again, I don't know if it is their dividing thought which made them think like that, or just because Buddhists did not consider Vedas as the authority. They felt it was something different. But they just said that Buddhists were the first people who started constructing temples or prayer centers for communal group gathering, worship and all those things. And now these inspired the local Vedic people or Hindus to construct temples, because the remnants they found were of the Buddhist, then comes the Hindu. Now Gupta period, no doubt they have encouraged a lot of this thing. Gupta period was a period which was in its zenith between 3rd and 5th, 6th centuries. But there are remains of temples even of an earlier date, references even of an earlier date. And again, another problem with the Western approach in education is if they stick on to one subject or one branch, they just get thorough only in that. They do not even try to understand, analyze, or consider other branches of knowledge which may be supportive.
Yeah, it's like a horse.
It's like a horse.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say these are all sister subjects. For example, sociology and political science, they are sister subjects, and all those things. Theoretically, they talk. But when it comes to evidence or something, as I said, just stick on to the factual things, whatever they say. They did not consider literature as a source which can give information. And there is another tendency among those scholars, those set of scholars or their followers, that if something doesn't suit their their agenda, or I don't know, their thought process,
Correct.
they will either doubt it or they may just say it's a later inclusion. So this is something which traditional scholars, we cannot accept it.
Yeah.
So existence of temple has been known from Ramayana itself. There are references about temple in Ramayana. Likewise, Chanakya mentions that there should be temples of the Chatussamaya. Chatussamaya was Jaina, Buddha, Shaiva and Vaishnava. These were the Chatussamayas. That is the four cults which were popular in those days in a township. He mentions it in his Arthashastra. Again, Arthashastra doesn't just mean finance and economics.
Yeah.
It includes a lot of Raja Dharma, Vritti Dharma and all those things.
Administration.
Our subjects have been always, wider.
Integrated. Yeah.
And they're not, very narrow. With just one concept, they will not proceed.
Yeah.
And further, Chanakya also mentions that inside a fortress, there should be a Durga temple constructed. So these are all the literary evidences we get for the existence of temple quite before the Gupta period. Only thing is, we really don't know the form of a temple of that time. What was the form? How was it? But I again feel it's a common sense matter. See, you have a house. When you have a house, you are building a house for the deity.
Yeah.
And that house has to be special. Something better than a common residence. This has been, our bhava always. Right?
Yeah.
That's how it works. Even you are building a house, even in the modern days, there are people who tend to give more importance for their puja room.
Correct.
To see it's more aesthetic, more appreciable, to give some, a divine touch. So this sense would have been in the builders of those days also.
It could also be the reason the non-existence of evidence is because of the material use.
Material use. That is the real reason behind.
Yeah.
Because
could be mud or wood or
perishable materials like brick, mortar, wood. All these things were used. And that is why all the vastugranthas, which I can elaborate while we are discussing that topic, they talk about Jirnodhara. So Jirnodhara was also known. So if something perishes or if something is getting dilapidated, you have to set it right. So that was also done.
Yeah.
So like this is one evidence where we get, and another evidence is inscriptions.
Yeah.
Inscriptions, there are many inscriptions which talk about existence of temples. One, as an example, I would like to quote here is, in Karnataka we have one inscription called as the Talagunda inscription. It is of the Kadamba king Ravi Varma. That's a very important inscription, as it furnishes information about the Kadamba genealogy also.
Okay.
So that is why it is considered very important. But regarding temple, what it says is that's a lengthy inscription. It talks about everything and says that this particular Kadamba king, he renovated the Pranaveshwara temple, and that Pranaveshwara was worshipped by Shatakarni.
Okay.
So Shatakarni is actually epithet carried by the Shatavahana rulers.
Okay.
And these Shatavahanas ruled somewhere between 2nd century before the Common Era up to the 2nd century Common Era.
Which is again before Gupta then.
Before, very much before Gupta.
Yeah.
So this mentions that, and he is getting that. And these Kadambas were almost contemporary to Gupta. So these are all the things which makes us understand that the building of temple was very much known from the earlier period, but the structural evidences we get is of a later period, because the medium of construction, as you mentioned, became stone after 3rd and 4th centuries in the northern part, and Badami Chalukyas adopted the same system in the south. And no, that's why the Western scholars, they say Badami Chalukyanara is the dawn of South Indian architecture, and Aihole is called as the cradle of southern temple architecture. And our people take a pride in quoting these quotations, saying, oh, Aihole is the cradle of architecture. But they don't observe one thing. If you go to Aihole, there are sculptures of maybe Gangadhara, Shiva, Natesha, all these things, which are so perfect, and they follow the textual prescriptions to the, up to the point. This shows that it is not an infant in the cradle.
Right.
If it is a cradle, it has to be in its infancy, right?
Correct.
Something like experimentation or something. The weapons of the deities, the mudras of the deities, the attire of the deities, the attribute of the deities, the episodes, as I said, the Ganga, Tarana, Bhagirath, these things are very well defined. So this shows that it is not a overnight, emergence.
Correct.
It has taken some centuries.
Whatever I have understood from the Vedic period is that they used to have these yajnas, right? And then this is my understanding. From the yajnas, then slowly this evolution of temples began from there. So now the yajnas is something which is like done as a like homa, or the ritual that is done as a gratitude to the gods, and that at that time nature worship was one major factor. So now the question arises, why did temples start getting built, and what's the evolution there? So that is what will be fascinating to know.
So usually, why a temple is a very less asked question. Not many people think that way. Usually it begins with when a temple began or whatever. But why a temple is a question to be asked. Now what happens, by the study of Vedic literature itself, we can understand that yajnas and yagas were the primary approach towards the gods in that period, in the Vedic period. Now again, nature worship means it is not just worshipping trees or rivers. We have to understand that. And we had personified forms of all the even natural elements, or we had given form for the supernatural powerful deities. It was known. It is not that they were only going behind trees or rivers. The thing is, we respected the entire creation, so that we see divinity even in a flowing river, on a tree or whatever, because we are benefiting by it. We are virtually using it for our purpose.
And for our safety.
For our safety, in all the ways. And they also recognized there is some divine power behind all these things, which keeps it going. So that's how, as you said, yagas and yajnas, one aspect was showing the gratitude, and the other approach was whatever you needed, your wants. If you wanted to get it fulfilled, it is like you ask the deities, right? So that is how they considered that they can approach the deities with their wishes. On the fulfillment, they will show their reverence and gratitude. That is what it was done. And I think you will know about the divisions of the Vedic literature. Usually, there are 4 divisions broadly. That is the Vedas, the Samhita Bhaga, which deal with the mantras. We have the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Vedanta, Upanishads. Now here what happens? The Brahmanas, they give regulations and rules for your conducting yajnas, yagas, and what are the fruits, benefits you get out of it.
Basically, rituals.
Rituals, it's ritualistic. A guidebook of rituals to be conducted. Then we have Aranyakas. At that time itself, there were some rishis who started thinking, is it all about just doing yajnas and getting benefits? If you want a good, like beverage, you do some Vajpaya or something else. You want some Putra Santana, Ishti. So you Putrakame Ishti, this, that, Ishti is done. So is it only fulfillments? And what is the net result if you have performed so many yajnas, so many, yagas and all these things? The thing is Sarga Prapti. So is this all? Is it all? You do homa, you get a good life here and you go to Swarga. Is there something beyond that? When they started thinking about it, that is why it is called as Aranyaka. Okay. So they retired to Aranyas and started thinking more about it. And then they started guiding people, okay, this is one level, but there is another level where you can be happier.
Okay.
Where you can approach the, better powers, better chaitanyas.
Okay.
So then. And ultimate result was the Upanishad.
Okay.
Where you talk about the ultimate Brahman. And all those things, which is far beyond only the Karma Kanda. Parallel to this, what happens is, there now, when you are performing yajna or yaga, it is a group activity. It is among few people. And of course, all the 4 Varnas used to participate in a yajna, because there are some verses which indicates how a woodcutter should sell wood for the purpose of yajna, and all these things are seen. So, but what happens is, it is temporary. Even if you are performing a Satra Yaga, it will go on for few months, an year, or a few years. But ultimate what happens, it is temporary. And it involves one group of people who are totally involved, and others are just on-seers. Spectators. They are not, like real benefactors of that entire process. And now, when you go to the Upanishad concept, every Atma is a product of the Paramatma. So he has the right for Jnana, Bhakti, Vairagya and all those things. And in our scriptures, for Jnana, Bhakti and Vairagya, there is no Varnashrama Dharma or Linga Veda. Anybody and everybody, any creation is entitled for that. Now, and there are some people who are just Pamaras. People who really cannot think about, which is not right or wrong. Here you shouldn't be judgmental about it. Each person will have their own limitation.
Yeah. When you mean that is that when don't think beyond existence.
Yeah. So there may be some people, okay, he may feel that, okay, my crops have to grow properly, my family has to be safe.
If I have two times of food,
that's sufficient. No ailments in my surroundings. So this would be a common man's approach towards life, which is not wrong. But again, he also has to, hold to something where he gets
a way to think beyond.
No, not thinking beyond that. There is some Chaitanya, because power seems to be a bit aggressive.
Shakti.
The word Shakti.
Okay. Energy.
Which is there to protect me or guide me. So I can completely stick onto it for my development and progress. So even a Pamara has to get this thought. Even a common man has to have this thing. So that is why the Rishis again thought, and that's how the agamas came as a part of Vedas itself.
Okay.
It is not something totally branched out or something. So then they said, see, Rishis are doing so much of tapas. There are people who are serving God with, the Trikaranas, and their energy should be distributed even among the common people. So how do you store the energy? How do you distribute it? Then they started thinking about the temples. So that is how, where, because even today, the murti is energized, and then the people get that Chaitanya.
That is why it is called as
Prana Pratisthapana.
Yes.
So they used Vedas as the basis, Vedic mantras as the ritualistic part, and then they said there should be a energy center from where people will get the the divine Chaitanya for themselves.
Okay.
And unfortunately, not many people will really understand this. And they will just say it is some,
some figment of imagination
or something. But if it is done in a proper way, it will have its effect. So that is how the temple started emerging.
Okay, cool.
So with this.
Fantastic. So let's take an example of the very famous these days, this Brihadeeswara Temple from the Chola period has become very famous because of some films and a lot of social media reels on that temple. People are starting to see now, okay, this is like a real wonder how the temple is standing for so long years. So I want to ask, we have all the modern technology, engineering, probably the best engineers of today, the architects and all that. Now, let's say if somebody comes and gives you, I don't know, so whatever the money that you require, right? And that person tells you, XYZ tells you that whatever the money you require, you take it. I want to rebuild the Brihadeeswara Temple today. What does it take to do that?
I really doubt if it is possible.
Okay, it's impossible?
It's quite impossible.
Okay.
Because what mattered behind the construction of Brihadeeswara Temple or any temple was just not the finance was of course necessary at any period, any given point of time. You needed resources, financial and other resources and all these things. But if you observe the temple building, along with Brihadeeswara, I would also like to mention one more temple, which is equally fascinating. See, there is something called as Atmarpana. Atmarpana is something beyond a dedication.
Okay.
Sometimes some of the English terms really don't give the complete
meaning of it,
sense of it. So that happens. So the sculptors in those days, they had set their heart and soul and life, and they really didn't bother if they lived to witness it, or they did not take pride in saying this is my work. So that Atmarpana Bhava is totally missing. And in the modern days, it has become very, very Vyavaharika. They don't plan anything beyond 50 to 60 years. For two reasons. One, if they plan it for too long durations, then their profession may stop somewhere. That fear is there. Only if there are more repairs, they will be more engaged. Otherwise, you just build something for 1,000 years. But our Bharatiya concept was Achandrarka. We always, if you are giving something, it is Achandrarka. Achandrarka means what? Until the sun and moon exist.
So almost eternal.
Almost eternal. And that amount of dedication, and what happens once you have this Atmarpana Bhava, then you will not really feel anything is difficult. You will go beyond your capability and try to do things. That was the real consciousness behind these sculptors. That is why Brihadeeswara was possible. Another temple's example which I would really like to mention is the Kailasa, Cave 16 of Ellora, the Kailasa temple. See, it has taken almost 150 years to get its present form. 150 years, any common person would say that the person who began the work was not there to witness the conclusion. And the people who were engaged in the activities in the verge of the completion of the temple, they did not know how it began.
Yeah.
But there was one common ideology or thought process which kept them together.
So that there comes purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost 4 to 5 generation of sculptors, and this is the beauty of the kulavrittis actually, which is today almost lost.
The family tradition.
Family tradition. The father, the son, the grandson, the great grandson, everybody were sculptors. So even as kids, they would have played with chisels and needles.
Yeah.
So from their infancy, without their knowledge, they would imbibe all these qualities. So these temples really, both Brihadeeswara and Kailasa, they stand as a testimony that the temple building was just not a vyavaharika thing.
Yeah.
It was far beyond that.
And I'm so fascinated by your two examples. The one Brihadeeswara is
Structural one, bottom top. And that has been chiseled from one boulder.
One boulder. That's like too fascinating.
Too fascinating, two entirely different concepts.
Different concepts.
But morphologically, they are very much identical.
Yeah.
The purpose is same.
Yeah.
So as you said, one is from downward to the upward, this thing. Another is from the upward. And here, even from Brihadeeswara Temple, there are some factors which the modern generation should know, the present generation should know. Because why? Well, in the modern constructions, what we are seeing, you go deep into the earth, you provide with some pillars, other things, or whatever for the stability of the structure and all those things. The Brihadeeswara Temple, which is almost 210 and odd feet from its Adhisthana, the lower molding, it stands on a foundation below the earth, which is only 5 feet.
What are you?
Yeah, it's just 5 feet.
The foundation is only 5 feet.
5 feet. The entire structure stands upon it.
Wow.
And this shows, that's what I was mentioning in our previous discussion, that our sculptors were not just people who know how to carve. They had to know so many parallel branches of knowledge. Now they had to know what a geologist knows today. The nature of the stone, the strength of the stone, how much of pressure the girth of the stone will have. So that the entire structure is built on the calculation of gravitation. Any Indian temple, if you take, they never used any mode of adhesive, like mortar, cement. No, one stone was placed, I mean a chiseled, carved, decorated stone, dressed stone, would be placed upon the other, binding them together. There used to be some interlock system in the stone itself, but no external support systems.
Adhesives.
No, nothing. No adhesive was used. It was just placed one above the other, one above the other. That's why they are never, linear in their placement.
Yeah.
And the weight was equally distributed.
Yeah, I'm sure today's engineers and architects won't even approve such a design.
No, they cannot. First, they have to have all these calculations, right? See, he has to first judge the width of the Adhisthana, because it has to withstand the weight.
Wait, yeah. Correct.
Above the structure above.
Yeah.
So all these calculations were very, very familiar to the Vastu Sthapatis of those days.
So you're almost saying that it's impossible to do it.
I sincerely feel so. Of course, there are some efforts in these days where they are rebuilding some temples using only stone. But the advantage these people are having today is they are using some form of adhesive to bind the stone together. And there is a lot of improvement in the modern technology, especially with your electrical cutters and other things, which will usually make the work much easier. See, chiseling something bare hands and using some other machine is really different. However you rethink about it, building Brihadeeswara again is something mission impossible.
Mission Impossible.
And again, another thing is the contemporary generation, I put it that way, because modern again is not always modern.
Modern.
The contemporary generation is, they also will be more inclined towards the output they get out of it.
Right.
You're investing so much, you're putting so much effort. So what is that you gain out of it?
Yeah.
This thought was never there among the
Correct.
ancient Stapatis or even the kings who patronized.
Today they will say, can I put a counter and monetize this?
So
Can I make how many toll zones can I make? To which entrance?
True. All those things they may probably do it in a very efficient way than showing so much of dedication.
Okay, so I'm like, to break it down, I will say that the essence or the sattva, the purpose and the technology, the engineering that was there at that time, which had a trust in some energies beyond, and they had the complete dedication.
Yes.
Which is the Atmarpana.
Atmarpana.
That won't happen today.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Because the entire thought process has changed a lot.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one more thing. The concept of I is dominating a lot.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to have a separate identity, separate recognition. Individualism, and whether he is worth of it or not.
Yeah.
And may it be in the right way or the wrong way.
Yeah.
That is working a lot.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I have faced some questions while discussing temple architecture. The credits are given only for the Hoysalas dynasties. The sculptors were the real people behind, and all such. I feel these questions arise when you are really not ready to dive deep into the subject.
Yeah. Again, I would say it's a colonial mindset.
They're not, because
it's patented and stuff like.
They never bothered about it.
Yeah.
So they just, if I can just quote an incident which happened some 150 years back in a family of one of our friends. Some 150 to 175 years back, in their family they wanted to get a rosewood mantapam done to place the gods. Regular house this thing. So in those days you could not go to a shop and just pick up or purchase or all those things. So some carpenter was invited home. He stayed in their house. He worked for almost 3-4 months or something like that, and he has created a very beautiful rosewood mantle, which still exists. It is there. And he worked hard almost for 5-6 months or 3-4 months or whatever the duration. At the end of the work, the people who got this done, it was the traditional way. They would place a set of dhotis and all those things, give it to them. It's not just giving money and settling it.
Yeah.
No, we always had this concept of recognizing it, and we will have a continued relationship. All those things are there. Then they asked him, so what is the labor for your work? He said, no, you have fed me for 3 months, and I really didn't expect this output of my work. No, she is like a daughter to me. I can't sell my daughter.
Oh.
So you have fed me for the duration of this work, and you are giving me dhotis. This is sufficient. I will not price my work. It is priceless. So I am giving my daughter to you. You take care of her well. And he just walked away.
Wow.
This is something which you cannot imagine today.
Today, yeah. Definitely not.
If you bend a rod in a very ugly fashion, calling it as an art piece, you expect some amount of defect.
Correct, yeah. Definitely.
So, why I am telling this incident is, this was the real mindset of Bharatiya thought.
Right.
Now, if you can can you imagine such work being done?
No.
So, reviving Brihadeeswara, rebuilding Hoysaleshwara, Shanta, all these things are.
In that example in the story that you said, that family who built it in today's world, I'm not saying everybody is like that. They would have sold it to someone.
Yeah, sure.
And then they would have made lots of...
No, the first thing is, as I said, everybody is behind the benefit.
Yeah.
The net result.
Correct, yeah. That's why it's like both the sides have become money.
Have become very...
So, unfortunate. I don't know what to do. So, let's go into the next segment of the discussion where we talk about the ancient texts and the science of the temple construction, that we can talk a little more detail about it. So let's maybe next move on to the next segment of it. Thank you so much for this one.
Thank you.